Good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis. We concluded the last words of the Rebbe Rashab, which does not finish the whole Hemshech, but the last what we have, the Rebbe Rashab left us, page 1477. So the plan that I laid out is that we would first somewhat elaborate more on these last themes about Yichud, then go back to the Ayin Beis flow, see what's left, so-called unspoken or unfinished, and taking from the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, Mika Hashem Elokeinu, Makbir L'Sheves, try to fill in those gaps, and then broaden it out to the central themes of Ayin Beis, and try to come away with the biggest picture possible of understanding with the Rebbe Rashab, what he was coming to conclude with, and maybe we could figure out what the end of the Ayin Beis would have been had it been written out, or at least to some extent we'll figure that out. So what we've done is so far is we've learned in Toras Sholom the Sikh of Simchas Torah Tafresh Ayin Daled, corresponding to 1913, about Yichud, and the Yichud of the mitzvah to be miyachid elokus, miyachid Atzmus, as he put it, that's our mitzvah, only to be miyachid Atzmus, which means seeing the exclusivity as well as the connection from existence, from elements, mitzvah elements. How do we connect and see the seamlessness between Atzmus, God, and existence? So we learned that there's two forms of yichud, two ways. Mamata l'mayla, mamayla l'mato. Mamata l'mayla is more integrated, more on our terms. But on the other hand, it has its impediments and challenges because we're trying to understand godliness on our terms. So we climb from existence to the tzimtzum, to the power of tzimtzum that's encompassed in Atzmus. And we don't, as he said, we don't completely get to the bottom of it. So we need some amunah here. On the other hand, Mamay Lamata is your beginning, the point of departure is Atzmus. Everything is Atzmus. But something exists. And that existence, as he put it, that itself is Atzmus. It's wood, but it's not wood. It's das or nishdas. Because in Atzmus, because Atzmus contains everything within him, though he's not contained by it, as he put it. As he defines everything, but is not defined by it. And Naveda, you also have the two forms. There's Naveda Umat L'mayla, a contemplation, where we begin first Mamala Kalam and understanding the divine within existence, then Sevav Kalam and the Hafla of the divine beyond existence, and then finally Hafla Atzmis, Mufla Mitzad Atzmi. It's completely beyond everything, which there again we lose ourselves, we lose our faculties, suspend our faculties and our senses. However, Torah mitzvahs talk about the tzaddikim. That's what they hold on to be able to contain it to some extent. Aveda Momayla is the other way around. The Aveda begins that everything is Atzmus. To use the exact learns on page 201. As Atzmus is nimtzel lemata kamei l'mayla. Atzmus is found everywhere, in every detail, every fiber of existence. And he cares. It's negeya to him. But he's not affected by it. It's negeya, but as he said, he's not nitfus. He's not defined by it. And then later at the end, he said, not just not defined, even more than, or you can say that itself, that experience itself is Atzmus. As I explained the two dimensions of that. That's page 201. And that's what we're up to. The last paragraph, the last sif, I should say, the bottom of 201. And I did want to go back to the beginning of this sikha because I see that few lines I want to read together with you that'll help us get back to what we're trying to contain. We're trying to basically, especially Mamayla Lamata, which is also our yichud. And he made it clear that even when we're miyachid Mamayla Lamata, the Aveda, it's still from our perspective. So it's like somewhat of a yerida legaba Atzmus, because Atzmus himself, without us, is obviously is the purest form of it. As soon as we already are uniting ourselves, these are the words he used on page, I believe, 197. He said that that when we do it Mamayla Mata, the Yichud, it's end of the day, so it's still not Atzmus. It's as best as we can understand Atzmus through the eyes of Atzmus. Mamat Lamayla is we're understanding Atzmus through our eyes. So just interesting, important thing to emphasize. But being that we're talking about something that's such a different reality, I thought it would be good also to go back to the beginning. But I want to first finish this Sikha, another literally 2 short paragraphs. So Sif Yud Beis, I'm going to continue page 201. Then after we'll go back to the beginning, just talk a little more about Atzmus, and then we will go back to Ayin Beis and I'll connect it, and then we'll continue the discussion back through the theme of Ayin Beis, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to understand here. So here's what he says at the end here. Nimtza. This is the bottom of the second column, page 201, if you want to follow along. Or, as I said, you could just, I'll explain it also. It's not necessary for you to follow the text. Nimtza, it's like conclusion. What do we derive? What's the takeaway? Shal inyan ha-mitzvahs nischayavnu ma'atzmus ein sof baruch hu. That in mitzvahs, we've been obligated, been commanded from Atzmus himself. Mamish. He alone commanded us and obligated us. It gave us the mandate called mitzvahs, which means it doesn't come from somewhere and say the ishtalshlus. It travels through ishtalshlus. It travels through the whole cosmic order. But where does it originate? All the way in Atzmus. And we learned that earlier as well. Therefore, the mitzvah of Yichud is also there. When the mitzvahs is voran, the mitzvah from Liachde. And among these mitzvahs is the central mitzvah, Liachde, that we should unite ourselves with the divine, with Atzmus. Idosech in Atzmus. So just as mitzvahs have been commanded straight from Atzmus, so same thing with the mitzvah of Yichud. Okay, as we learned earlier, that's not a mitzvah to miyachid Atzilus. As he said, Atzilus exists and Bria exists. Ak exists. These are all levels that exist. It comes to Atzmus, only Atzmus exists. So how do we reconcile that with existence? So that's so there we go. And this yichud, there are two dimensions, 2 aspects, 2 elements. Mamata l'mayla, u'mamayla mata. He's summing up. It's the conclusion of the sikh from the bottom up. From the top down. Next page, top of 202. We talk about the second manner. When we go from Mamaylamata, then we come to Atzmus. Like he said that language also, right in the beginning, when he began speaking about the 2 ways, he said that you come to let's see the words. And when it comes to Malamata, you have the Atzmus commercial who's all Yered and Lamata. Like he speaks about Mountain Teda. Kupmitzutza Atzmus. Yeah, top of page 197. Just looking at the language is very similar there. Yeah. Which means we get the best possible picture of Atzmus Mamay Lamata. Ukamoy came Ba'aveda. Remember, there's Yichud. That's the mitzvah to understand, appreciate the seamlessness or the union. And then there's the Aveda, but Ukamaykem Ba'aveda Primi says Beis Inyanim. In Aveda Primi is also 2 things. Aveda Mamatla Mamayla, Mamayla Mata. What you could say, what's the difference between Aveda and Yichud? So we discussed it. I'll just sum it up. Yichud is the specific mitzvah of B'miyachid, and there's the 2 ways how we do Yichud. Aveda is our entire work that we do on ourselves, our refinement to experience that Yichud. In other words, Mamat L'mayla, we go through Mamala Kalam, Seviv Kalam, Mamayla Mata, we go from Atzmus down, but it's essentially corresponds to the two of them. But Yichud is the specific mitzvah of Yichud. Aveda is our general Aveda, which also goes these two tracks, bottom up and top down. Was that Eifan Aveda Momayla Lamata is Mitzada Atzmus. The Eifan Aveda of Momayla Lamata, like we said, you're starting the Atzmus is in everything. You're not working your way, okay, here's my piece of bread. Who created this bread? And from there you climb all the way upward. In the Mayla Mata, you start, how is it Mitzada Atzmus? Atzmus gave us a mitzvah, or Atzmus wants and cares how we behave. As Alts is negay and Atzmus ain't say Baruch Hu. That everything is negay, everything is important to Atzmus ain't say Baruch Hu. And with that he concludes the Sikha. This is the end of the Sikha. But then there's one more piece. It says, after he finished, the Rebbe Rashab added something. He said like this. Kol kavanasi b'maimer hazeh. My entire intention, the Rebbe Rashab is saying, with this discourse or with this presentation, maimer, with this discourse, hoya alzeh inyan ha'ech shakol negei ba'atzmus. It was all coming to underscore on this inyan how everything is negei in atzmus. Remember when we said it's negei in atzmus, then every detail matters. There's no such thing as something small. Even a dover kal that he called lenient is also negei in atzmus. Everything is like negei in atzmus, every detail of the picture. Was as menveis mit vem man hotzatan. Because when we know with who we're dealing with, meaning we're dealing with atzmus, hatman god ananda derecheretz. You have a complete different type of derecheretz, respect. This is a very personal and emotional and very powerful conclusion. In other words, he's giving us, why is he saying all this? Obviously to explain the idea, but also to give us a sense who you're dealing with. We're dealing with complete different reality, and that we have a completely different respect. I can say a lot on this very few lines. I'll just say a few short points, because we've been talking about how much we understand and how it works. Atzmus, is it Atzmus? Is it not Atzmus? Because at the end of the day, Chassidus Chabad wants us to have a relationship with the deepest and the highest levels, which of course, on one hand, makes things a lot more complex, because how do we understand it? There's such opposites, so many paradoxes involved. But on the other hand, it's extremely uplifting, and it's the ultimate bittul, that you know that Atzmus shows you and shows me and shows these mitzvahs and shows all these details and says, I want you to do this. That's how you connect with me. We may not understand why and how exactly, but we do know that's coming from Atzmus. That's something the Rebbe Rashab is saying. I want you to understand where it's all coming from, Atzmus, and not lower levels. And therefore you have kola under derecheretz. Another thing that I take away from these words is almost the Rebbe Rashab sensing that he spoke very deep ideas. That not everybody, it's over everybody's head to some extent, because it's to wrap your head around that it's wood and it's not wood. It's space and it's not space. And the Hakbala itself is not Hakbala because God is not defined by it. Or Atzma, that itself is Atzmus. The not nitfas, it clearly very ideas that need a lot of work. As I said, it could be a lifetime of effort to just try to experience this. So the Rebbe Rashab is in a sense saying, even if you don't understand it all completely, just know that you're dealing with something that's completely beyond, and just that alone is elevating. So you have a completely different respect. You know, if God is a God on our terms, so obviously respect him. He's like superior to us. But at the end of the day, there's something still commensurate. But when you realize that you're dealing with something completely different reality, as well as some understand a little better, some a little less, that alone is an extremely elevating experience, because you're like dealing with something. The mere fact that we don't understand it tells you, wow, we're dealing with something completely different reality. So it has a very different, it's our attitude to God and doing a mitzvah, a completely different derecheretz when you know with whom you're dealing. Okay, so the more we understand how Atzmus is so unique and different than our reality, that itself is elevating. whether we understand all the details and how you deal with the contradictions or the paradoxes, at least in our mind, so that's already each of us in our own way has to struggle with that. And to come to the point, either you understand that paradox is not a paradox, or even furthermore, altogether, it's all one. And it's Atzmus choosing to manifest in all these different ways. And, okay. So with that, we conclude the Sikha. The main thing I wanted to discuss in this is the context in Ayin Beis, that how everything in existence is one with Atzmus. Obviously, in Ayin Beis, he speaks about it, doesn't go matla quite the way he says it here, even though he does speak about Yechud Tato, Yechud Elah, Das Tachten, Das Elyon. But as I said, I will not say necessarily that the two things there are these two, not yet at least. But regardless, he does come away at the end that there's the Yichud of these two Yichudim, and that it's all one in Atzmus. And therefore, even the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, the divine, in other words, of Mamala Kalam, is exactly one like the divine of, like the Ayin of the Yesh HaMiti. And therefore, by extension, the Isavas, to use the lines in Ayin Beis, he says, when kol mashinisava, kol ubchinas amshachim in Atzmus umiyuchid by is bar betachlas hayichud. Not just bottle, but also miyuchid by. So the Toras Sholom comes to add somewhat how we understand what it is that existence is miyuchid with God from God's perspective. Because remember, the third yichud is the yichud of yichud, the das elyon, das tacht mitzad Atzmus. There's no, the person that tzimtzum do not conceal. So mitzad Atzmus, it's all one. So the Toras Sholom helps us understand it both from the bottom up and from the top down. Okay. And then when he says at the end, one more thing, that Yechud Tato is a Yichud like Yechud Elah Mamish. So in Toras Sholom, he did not say that the Mamata Lamaila is one with Mamaila Lamata. He never said that statement. He said there's two ways. So it could be the Ayin Beis is going even further, because he's telling us that from the point of view of Atzmus, even Mamat Lamaila is also one with Mamaila Lamata. So that's one more thing I would add. As I said, that's not in Toras Sholom. Toras Sholom does not go that far, for whatever reason, because it's not the point that he wants to make here. He was just talking about the two forms of Yichud. But at the end of the day, what we do get somewhat that Toras Sholom adds is perhaps a deeper picture of what it means unity with Atzmus. What does that mean? Whether it's from the bottom up or from the top down. Because remember, in Ayin Beis, he also spoke from the bottom. He also spoke and said that Tzimtzum itself is a Koyach HaTzimtzum, therefore it's one with the Koyach HaGili. He made that very clear on page 1474, as well as 1474 primarily. Yeah. He said it very clear. He said it almost the same words. He said that since it's a Koyach Ein Sof, Tzimtzum Pasim is not Mailim. Why? Because Lo Yesh Kashum Hefsek. It's Koyach HaHester, K'may Koyach HaGili. Like similar to what he said in Toras Sholom.
Where does he say this? Which part of 1474?
Middle of the page.
Thank you.
Okay. Which is very much the language of Mamat Lamaila in Ayin Beis, in Toras Sholom rather. And the other approach that the Tzimtzum, that's the Tzimtzum is Kol Ba'atzmus. Then that Atzmus itself is the Tzimtzum, or with the way he put it here. In other words, the Hester's Kol, Hester Gufa B'chinas Atzmus, that's already deeper. And even though you could probably fit it into words in Ayin Beis, I would have to look more clearly to see, is there a line in Ayin Beis that says that more explicitly? I don't think I've seen it explicitly, but you probably can extrapolate from there. Okay. The point I really want to make is I'm not trying to show that Toras Sholom parallels Ayin Beis. It's not like, oh, whatever he says here is in Ayin Beis exactly. It's not necessarily the case. There's overlap, and one can help understand the other. So I'm not looking to force that the three levels in Ayin Beis exist also in Toras Sholom, not necessarily. And that's perfectly fine. we can learn many things from Toras Sholom without having to fit everything exactly. So it's not like if the Toras Sholom said, I'm coming to explain Ayin Beis, or the Ayin Beis said, I'm coming to explain the Toras Sholom, it's one thing. It was I'm the one that brought them together. So there's no necessarily need to show that each detail is in the other one. But there's enough here to, as I said, to help us understand Yichud better. But more importantly, as we'll soon see, and I don't know, the coming classes, all this is coming to really help the Nefesh Habamis love God, where the Nefesh Habamis on its own does not, because it's a Sayesh. At the end of the day, all these Yichudim are not just as the mitzvah of Yichud to connect ourselves with God, but also that our being gets saturated with godliness. That even the Nefesh Habamis, on its own initially, is a yesh anivra, will also come to appreciate the godliness within it, and even the higher levels, which ultimately lead to the V'haftas Hashem Elokecha and answer the big question: how could the Nefesh Habamis come to love God when it's fundamentally the exact diametric opposite? And that's one of the points that the whole thing, this whole discussion, Ayin Beis, is coming to answer. In Toras Sholom, he's not coming to answer that question. He never went there. He never brought the Nefesh Habamis. So Toras Sholom helps us understand the Yichud, but that next statement, how it comes back to page 1466 in Ayin Beis, to answer the question, Eich Yichel Neshama Lifla Bittul B'Nefesh Habamis. That's the theme of Ayin Beis, based on the Mika Hashem Elokeinu from Torah and the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. So we'll get back to that soon. But before we do, I wanted to jump back now. This is not posted on the group. I'm just going to use a few lines I'm going to read, and you want to look it up. But basically, the Sikh of Simchas Torah begins on page 190. We began reading, I believe, from 194. Yeah. From Osvav of 194. I just want to read a few lines that can help. It'll help understand a few things here. So the whole thing began, just like we just concluded, that he said, my whole kavanah with this mimer, my intention was to explain that it's all the mitzvahs, that's all negaya, it's all coming. What was his words, exact words? It was actually had called negaya ba'atzmus, and like he said, that mitzvahs came from Atzmus. So that's how he began. The beginning of the Sikha, which was said, Yom Simchas Torah, Ulam HaGadol, in the great hall of the yeshiva. So he said like this: This is how this Maimer, this Sikha is known, that all mitzvahs relate to Atzmus. Von Atzmus allein sei mir nitztave geworden al inyan ha-mitzvahs. Basically what we just read, from Atzmus himself, from the Baal HaRotzen, meaning not from the Rotzen itself, is this desire, that desire, from the owner. You know, when you want something, there's what you want, and there's you who wants it. So he's saying mitzvahs go all the way back to the you, to Atzmus who wants. And he goes on to explain, which I'm not going to read right now, what does that mean, that Atzmus is Baal HaRotzen? Means he's the root and source of all the Ritzanos. Whatever he's going to desire, including the desire to create existence, including the desire for all the Giluyim and Hamshachas, for all the Hamshachas and Giluyim, everything that will transmit from him, who is the Baal HaRotzen, who is the master of all these, we're saying is the source of it all. That's where mitzvahs are traced, all the way back there. Baal HaRotzen. Then he said, then he continues and says that in truth, you can't even call him Ein Sof. You call him Atzmus Ein Sof. You can't really call him Ein Sof, because Ein Sof is also a description. And Atzmus is not describable. And he goes on to explain how he's not describable. I'm bringing it because I think it can help us understand what he says later, that we want to look Mamai Lamata from Atzmus' point of view. You have to remember you're dealing from an indescribable level, something that doesn't have any definition and doesn't have any description. So he goes on to explain how this state that's completely indescribable, completely without definition, that's the one that commanded us in mitzvahs. Which in itself, when you hear that, is already a paradox. What does that mean? If you said the mitzvahs came from some place that has some description, some definition, that would make sense. Hashem, that level is telling us, here's the mitzvah, tefillin, Shabbos, kosher, whatever it is. But you're saying it's a level completely without definition. But mitzvahs seem to have a definition. So in other words, the definition of mitzvahs is coming from a place that has no definition. So that goes back to what we learned, that Atzmus is and not. He said Hagbola and Atzmus. No, you can't say Hagbola and Atzmus. You have to say the Hagbola is not nitfis, he's not defined by it, like Mokam Ha'aron Eina Min Hamida, like the space of the ark, or as he said, that itself is Atzmus. Which means we call it definition because we see definition. And in our perspective, after the Tzimtzum, there's definition, but not from Atzmus' perspective. So this is the hard thing to wrap, but that's what he says very clearly. And then he says clearly, not only we don't know what Atzmus is, even the highest levels in the Shtalshalos don't know, including Ak, including all the levels in the Shtalshalos. And then he goes to the famous expression that you may have heard in the past, Ili Yadaita Ve'yisiv. If I knew him, I would be him. And the Rebbe Rashab adds his own diuk, what that means. In other words, if you knew him, you really knew him, then you'd be him, then you wouldn't be you. And he goes on to explain, as I said, I'm just choosing some select thoughts, some select lines. He goes on to explain like this. 1 second. Because since Atzmus created existence in a way that it should have its independent consciousness, so that alone tells you that Atzmus doesn't want us to know him and be him. He wants us to be us. That's what he says. He wants you to be an independent consciousness. So he goes on and says, so therefore, if a person chooses to want to know Atzmus, that means you're going away from your own independent consciousness. So then it says, Atzmus nemtzu. He draws you into him. It's like the fact that, say, the sun that leaves the sunlight that leaves the sun, the only way that it could radiate and not burn up and overheat the world is because it moves away from the sun. If the sunlight chooses to go back into the sun, then we would not be able to go with it. So the point is that everything God did was in order for us to have independence, an independent consciousness. You want to come back and know me, then you'll be drawn in. I don't want to use the word gravitational pull of Atzmus, but that's just poetically, you could put it that way. So he says these words. I want to just read these words, very powerful words. Ich hab doch dir gemacht, chutz la'atzmusi. I created you to be outside of me, meaning with an independent consciousness, that you should not feel me. Obviously, it's not outside, because Atzmus contains everything. Isa du kommst zu, wissen Atzmus nämlich dir zu. So if I created you to be an independent consciousness, and now you are coming to me, to know me, I will then absorb you. Weißt du mich? If you're going to know me, bist du ich. Then you will be me. In other words, I'm giving you the ability to be yourself. But you want to be me? You want to know me? You're going to have to be me. Bist du nicht deiner, bist du meiner. If you're not independent as your own self, then you're mine. What else? There's no third option. So this is not a threat. It's just a reality how God created us, that he does not want us to be him. Because then you're not you anymore. Then you see things from Atzmus' point of view. And he says, this is the meaning of Ilya Daita Ve'yisiv. If you knew me, you'd be me. He says there are those that interpret that in Kabbalah, he says, Bali Kabbalah. He says, Achreinu v'sham gizen Kabbalah from the Gishmake Eden. He says they're very pleasurable Jews. They explained the Ilya Daitave Yisuf is this, that a Baal Tachlis, a finite entity, cannot know an infinite entity, or an entity that's built in Baal Tachlis. And he says, I'm interpreting it in a deeper way. That this is because Mitzvah Atzmus, that not just you can't reach it because you're defined, but Mitzvah Atzmus because Atzmus would draw you in if you wanted to enter into that inner chamber, so to speak. And then later he explained, it says, the Rebbe Rashab explained it later, I guess by Chazorah, he may have explained it after they repeated it, because due to Atzmus, you can actually join together these two opposites. So you have to say, so Atzmus, you could have these two. But there's another aspect. God wanted us to be independent. Now, bottom line is, through Avodah, and we refine ourselves, we can come to understand and even appreciate and be absorbed. But as I said many times, we will never be God. That's not the goal. The goal is to understand that as much as possible, our existence through the eyes of Atzmus. And that's the ultimate L'mayla Lamata. So that's one more thing I wanted to read. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to. So then he says, Nimtzum, we don't know what Atzmus is, but we could have a Hashara. We could somewhat, we somewhat envision or estimate it. It says one thing we know for sure, that Atzmus is not a makabel from anyone. He receives nothing from anyone. And that's where he goes into that even if nothing exists, only Atzmus exists. Let me just see if there's anything more I want to bring here. Yeah, there's more stuff here that's very interesting, but you can read it on your own if you like. I'm happy to post some of the images of these pages, or you can just look it up on the page number I gave you. 190 starts on 190.
It would be helpful if you could please post it. I'm having a hard time finding it online. It's not at Hebrew Books.
So
It's not easy to find.
Okay.
Is the Sefer Sichos compiled for all years, or is it year by year?
It's one book that has a number of sichos from different years.
Okay.
They also translated into Hebrew. There's a Hebrew version. They're both on Hebrew books, by the way.
Oh yeah.
But I find there's a Hebrew version of it. They translated the whole. This one is mostly combination of Yiddish Hebrew, but there's a Hebrew.
It's like
version.
It's broken up into different sections. Patach Hadavar, Or Chaim, Yeradea, Evan Ha'ezer, Shonos.
No, that's Shulchan Aruch. This is Toras Sholom.
It says Sefer Admor Rashab's Sichos Toras Sholom. I'm looking at it right now. Hemshech Ayin Beis.
So you do have it.
Oh, I do. I'm telling you, when I click on it, it has 5 sections which don't correspond with Sichos. Hemshech Ayin Beis, Kuntrus Umayan, Sichos Toras Sholom.
So the Sichos Toras Sholom is a book.
Right. I click on it and it gives me 5 separate subdivisions.
They are separate things. This list is books that Rebbe Rashab said or wrote. So you have Kuntrus Umayan, you have Toras Sholom, you have the other things. It's the Or Chaim has. It's not Toras Sholom. It's the other sefer.
Well, I'm telling you what it looks like on Hebrew. Whatever. If you could please I don't want to take up time on the recording. If you could please post the pages you read from, I'd appreciate it. I'm sure others would too. The only other way you can read it is if you own the book.
Okay. Good.
And
So,
Simon, it's a
yeah.
pity that you didn't, same way that we learned the second half of this sikha, there's such fascinating thing here. You just took out points here and there. Why don't you learn the whole thing?
I still want to keep focused on Ayin Beis and not go off too much on different things. I mean, so I read, I think, what's relevant to us, and you could look it up yourself and read it, because today I'm happy if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer as well. I just wanted to go back to, because he describes a little more, speaks about how Atzmus is completely beyond, and yeah, that language is very strong language.
There is a next sikha from summer.
Weißt du ich, bist du mich. Very good. Yeah, wow. Yeah.
In summer Ayin Daled, it's very fascinating. The Rebbe Rashab is talking there about the war between the Germans and the English, and the Rebbe Rashab said,
And I involve, I think,
the Germans gave big shots. They should be less. Fascinating thing what's going on there.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Any questions before I continue? I'm going to go back now to Ayin Beis. Actually, I wanted to do one more thing before we go to Ayin Beis, but any questions? Okay. I had also posted, when I first posted this Toras Sholom, I posted a page from Sefer HaSichos Tavshin Mem Ches, Chukas Tavshin Mem Ches. I just wanted to say one thing about that. I'll keep it brief. There he talks also about how the Yesh HaNivra is one with the Yesh HaMiti, meaning...
Which chaylik is this?
Sefer HaSichos Tavshin Mem Ches.
It's not a Likutei Sichos.
No, it's a whole new set called Sefer HaSichos Tavshin Mem Ches Chelik Beis. So there he says, you can find it on the group. I posted the page. There he says there's a concept of Yesh HaNivra is one with the Yesh HaMiti. So firstly, based on the Ageres HaKedesh, that's only Atzmus that can create the Yesh, like we've learned a number of times, that a Yesh that does not feel its source, an independent reality that does not feel a source, could only be created by something that has no source, and that's Atzmus. In other words, Oyer, for example, that feels its source, can't create something that doesn't feel its source. The Rebbe Mittler Rebbe takes it further in Biurei Azayar and says the concept of Yesh HaNivra is therefore one with the Yesh HaMiti, because it reveals to us that level of Atzmus that Oyer and other levels cannot reveal to us. We've learned about this quite a number of times earlier in volume 3 and earlier as well. So there the question is, what's the Yesh HaNivra? What are we talking about? So in some places it appears that it means the Neshamas Yisrael that come down into a body, that Yesh is talking about the Neshamas, not existence itself. Existence, you could say, was created by the Yesh HaMiti, but it's not one with the Yesh HaMiti, because the Yesh is a separate entity. Neshamas are like God's so-called Chelik Elikam and Malmamas. They have an element that makes them one, not just created by it, but actually one. But there in that Sikha, the Rebbe goes a step further and says that that's from our point of view. But from Atzmus' point of view, the Yesh HaMiti could be one with the Yesh HaNivra. Why not? However, it's the power of Atzmus, not the power of Giluyim. In the world of Giluyim, that doesn't make sense. But in the world of Atzmus, that makes sense. That's what he says there. I'm just going to bring out the actual language. Okay. Okay. So I'm looking now at Chukas, page 520. They said it's on the posted. So he says, okay, yesh amit yesh anivra. Shazeh ikar b'negei leguf Yisrael. Guf Yisrael.
I just posted it to the WhatsApp group. Where are you holding page 520?
It's only one page. I'm in the middle of the page. I'm looking at the footnote 42. Okay. So he says, even though in general we say it about the Bria, but it's primarily about Neshamas. Okay. So there's an explanation in the Likutei Sichos, volume 12, that says Neshamas, they themselves are one with Atzmus, and the creation is only created by Atzmus. So then the question is, how can we say that? You say Iyu v'chayu echad, Iyu v'gamu echad, oneness only in Atzilus. You don't say it on Bria.
Because everything is Atzmus, so it has to follow.
So therefore, the answer is, because you're talking from Giluyim, you can't say Bria is one with Iyu. Only Atzilus is. Aval mitzad Atzmus, Gama Bria, v'yesh hanivra is kul echad m'yesh amiti. But then he says v'tzarech iyin gadol, which is usually means it needs a lot. It's not easy at all to understand this. It needs a lot of iyun, a lot of exertion to understand, a lot of immersion to understand this. Ain't kama kame. Okay, but when we prepared the Sikha, we were not aware of the Ayin Beis. Not because it wasn't printed. I hadn't learned it yet. Had I learned it, I would have definitely brought it into this, because in Ayin Beis, in Toras Sholom, there he says it clearly. The Atzmus is the wood, is the yesh. He's not saying it only about neshamas. He says it about existence. So obviously we would have asked the Rebbe whether we can bring that into this picture and it's the same thing or not. Maybe it isn't. But ostensibly, to me, it seems that the Ayin Beis and the Toras Sholom would have helped understand what he says here. And nevertheless, we still say that the Amitis Inyan of Yesh Nivra and Yesh Amiti goes on Yisrael, and the Rebbe wrote these words when he edited this piece. He wrote, because everything else was created for neshamas, b'shvilam. And the Rebbe gave the example, Valderach HaChiluk, the Metzias Evet Knani, Legaba Adnu, Metzias Nechosov. Like the difference of a master who owns a servant, an Evet Knani, that would be the example for the world. And Metzias, I'm sorry, not necessarily. Metzias Evet Knani, Legaba Adnu, Metzias Nechosov. The difference between his property, Nechosov is his property, his land, and the Metzias of Evet Kanani. That's what the Rebbe wrote. We never got to the bottom of how this example works exactly. We actually had three different ways to explain it. But bottom line is, both are owned by the master, by the Odin. He owns it all. And they're all part of who he is. The only difference is, one is serving the other. For example, the land that he owns is not quite like the servant that he owns. The land serves the servant. Now, why he used Evet Kanani, I don't know. Why couldn't he say Evet Ivri? But that's what the Rebbe wrote. The point being is that everything, therefore, is one with the master, with Atzmus, but there could still be a difference because one can serve the other. The very fact that Atzmus created all, everything is Atzmus, doesn't mean he didn't create them for different functions. And remember, once it comes into, say, the shtalshes, there are different tracks. So you could say one level is there for another level, even though they all originate, like we learned in Ayin Beis, that even though Das Elyon and Das Tachton are both tracks that come from Atzmus, he wants them both, and it's not Ayin Ma'ayin, they both come from one, the Makar, the source, but at the end of the day, they do travel through each other. In other words, they do interact with each other, so they both originate in the same source, and then they serve different purposes as they manifest in existence. So I just wanted to bring that into the picture. And then he finally says that the difference between the world and Yisrael, and is that goof of the Yesh HaNivra is one with the Yesh HaMiti, is B'Koyach Atzmus. Because the Eibishter can do everything. But Mitzad the Nivra, you can't say the Nivra is one with godliness, with Atzmus. Like we learned here. That's Atzmus, everything is one. Mitzad Atzmus, not Mitzad the Nivra. Mashen can be Yisrael, Mitzad Gufa, also Mitzad B'Riyosem Ukavyachal Atzmus. In other words, in Shabbos Yisrael, it's more, even they can experience how they're one with Atzmus. Whereas by the Nivra, you require completely coming through the eyes of Atzmus. In a way, you could say somewhat like he said about the Yichud, Momat L'mayl L'mayl L'mato, that the Yichud, we are being Miyachid. The Neshamas Yisrael down below are seeing it through the eyes of Atzmus. That means we have a capacity to somewhat experience even L'mayl L'mata. Even if it's not perfect, but it's an experience where the world, existence, cannot do that. A cow in the field, or a bird in the sky, or a tree, they are one with Atzmus Mitzad Atzmus. But they themselves can't experience it. The eights that he talks about, the wood, doesn't experience it. Atzmus experience. Atzmus says, I'm one with the wood. I emit, and the wood is wood, but it's not wood. But a neshama actually experiences it in a conscious way. That's what I wanted to add based on this footnote in Tov Shemem Ches, which helps distinguish between neshamas and the world, but basically between conscious human beings as opposed to existence itself. Okay, that's why I wanted to bring that into the picture. That helps also understand some things that aren't spelled out in Ayin Beis and not even in Toras Sholom. So those are the few things I bring into this whole discussion. Again, if anybody wants to ask anything, please do. No questions? Okay, good. Good. Yeah, I really wish I would have brought the Toras Sholom and the Ayin Beis. That would have been very helpful here. But okay. Next time I meet the Rebbe, I'll try to bring it up.
After 120 years, God's willing.
I mean, hopefully before.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Mashiach.
Yep. Okay. No question. So fine. So with that, let me go back now to Ayin Beis. Now, in Ayin Beis, we were learning that there is a perspective from our end, how we see things from this side of the Parsa and the Tzimtzum. So there, clearly, we obviously don't see higher levels of the divine, and definitely not the way Atzmus sees it. But from the perspective, L'gabe Atzmus, ein shum hevdel v'hefsek klal. And therefore, the that's the moked for the yesh, is united yichud ba'atzmus ein sof mamish k'maya ayin aleph. just like the ayin that is the ayin of the yesh amiti. Like the example he gave with the teacher.
Where are you reading from?
The end of Ayin Beis. So the teacher, as we know, before he teaches the student, so he understands the idea in his own high level, but he also has within him, even though it's not yet discernible, the ideas that he's going to teach the student. And there it's all one. So even afterwards, when there's the parsa, the tzimtzum, that the teacher employs to convey the idea to the student, that's from the student's point of view. But from the teacher's point of view, it's exactly the same thing. It's all one seichel, all as it originated. Like he said, the only thing is, it's applying itself more, so it's more his galus. Like he said, this is all the way God, within his own so-called, within his own consciousness, as he envisions and measures and allocates resources within him, it's all part of him. Both deis hashavim, ayin of the yesh, is exactly in the same level of bitl v'yichud b'tachas k'maya ayin shel yesh amiti. And then he continues and says, and the same thing is with the way we are miyachid. Like he spoke in Toras Sholom, that it's our mitzvah is to be miyachid. That miyachid Beis is baruch b'chinas yichud elah v'yichud tata. Those are the two levels of ayin. As I said, I cannot say for sure that these are like mamat l'mayl l'mayl l'mata. Maybe, maybe not. So we have to not just miyachid them, we also liyachid gam beizei yichudim. That both yichudim are all one. You could say that the yichud tata is das tachten is like yichud mamata l'mayla. I mean, I don't have a problem saying it. I just don't want to say definitively, absolutely, because I didn't see that he's literally, that anywhere that it says is two levels are the same. And you could say yichud elah das elyon is the perspective from above, is like mamay lamat. The reason I hesitate that, because it doesn't say in Ayin Beis that that's mitzad Atzmus. The third level is mitzad Atzmus, where those two become one. And that's where it's not exactly Toras Sholom and Ayin Beis, because in Toras Sholom he doesn't talk about the two becoming one. He just says mamat mamay lamat. Can you break it down and say that in mamay lamat itself there's two? There's how Atzmus sees existence. Like he said, everything is a negeya, but he's not nitfis in it, or it's all Atzmus. Maybe that oi that he said is like this third level in Ayin Beis, maybe. But I don't have enough, let's put it this way, evidence for that. So I'll say that's possible you could interpret it that way. That Mamay Lamata has an element that you're seeing it from Atzmus' point of view, in contrast to Mamata Lamayla, that we go work our way up. And then there's yet another level where they're one, which is what he's saying here.
Why can't you say that?
And that's where you see that Atzmus and one with existence. But again, I hesitate saying it because there are enough reasons to say that's not exactly similar as I pointed out, and for more reasons. But regardless, as I said, I don't need to make them parallel. Perfectly fine if it's not exactly the same. Each one adds some Havana understanding to the other. I just wanted to bring back the whole theme here. So then he says, since it's all miyuchid betachlis ba'atzmusei, so everything that was created is all amshacha atzmus miyuchid be is bara betachlis hayichud, and it's only b'chinas his galus bilvad, which you could say helps us understand what he said in Toras Sholom. So is there a piece of wood or is there no piece of wood? The answer is a piece of wood, but it's only his galus of atzmus. It's one aspect that atzmus is revealing that in our eyes looks like wood, but it's really Atzmus. And that's the final he finishes, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It's all in one pasuk. Yichud Elah and Yichud Tata. Lemhev Echad Be'echad. Shagam Yichud Tata B'chinas Yichud K'ma Yichud Elah Mamish. Bottom line is that there's a level here, this highest level, that even the divine within existence is all rooted and all in the same Atzmus, all united, just like with the divine that's beyond existence. So it all is one in that level, all one. You could also explain that this itself can be explained mamat l'mayla lamata. You could say going from a malas seviv to Atzmus, you ultimately come to a place where it's all one, but that's from the bottom up. Or you can go from the top down, and everything starts with Atzmus, then it comes down all the way to the lowest levels, and that's all one. Just two different ways of getting to that one. But they are different, like he said in Toras Sholom, that the second one, you get closer to Atzmus. In the first one, it's more integrated within you. Now, why am I elaborating on all this? Because this sets the stage to go back now, and that's what I'm going to do next. What are the things in Ayin Beis that were not finished? All this was coming to explain something. The Rebbe Rashab does not have the Eisfir, doesn't conclude, okay, now that we know this, so I want to go back now into Ayin Beis itself and show and indicate, I'm going to point very clearly pieces that were not left finished, that need to be addressed now. So first we'll identify what those pieces are and have a bunch of them that I'll point out. And then I'll review where are we going to find answers to this. So there's the Maimonim of the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, are critical piece here, but there's also other things in Toras Sholom that we learned and others that we can find ways to tie the knots together and get the bigger picture out of all of this. And you'll see from that why the Toras Sholom was so vital. Not just to understand this last piece about Achdus, but also to help us understand the bigger picture of Ayin Beis. Because Ayin Beis does talk about Mamat L'mayla Lamata, which is a general Haramim Chelekaya Melech through Tefillah or through Torah, which we'll discuss soon. That's where I want to go next. But I'll stop if anybody wants to ask anything about what I just said. So I'm laying out what we're going to do next. As I laid out in the beginning, the plan. To me, it's very methodical. And I think the best way to really develop all of this properly.
If I may, Rabbi Jackson, I want to add something to what you said, but in my words, and tell me if I'm target or maybe I'm wrong. The difference between Ayin Beis and Toras Sholom is, in Ayin Beis, when the Rebbe was writing it, it's pure seichel. In Ayin Beis, in Toras Sholom, it's regesh. You see, he put in all his feelings into it. The word he's using in Yiddish, he's expressing feelings, not the seichel. Like he's saying, the seichel says this and this and this, but if you don't understand, this is how I feel.
Okay, I'll comment on that. I'll tell you my feeling right away. When I first read Toras Sholom, I would say now 50 years ago, 49 years ago. So I went, what should I say? It blew my mind. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Because the Toras Sholom was like between the lines of what you read in Chassidus. Chassidus is far more formal, structured. And Toras Sholom is informal. Like Naftali just said, it's like he's talking personally and language that you don't see in a mimer and so on.
It's a Verbringen.
Yeah, but then I came to another awareness that they're actually the same. It's just different language. So I would say a little deeper than what you said. I would say initially it sounds like Ayin Beis is seichel, and Toras Sholom is hergish. I would say other way, that the hergish of Toras Sholom reveals the hergish of Ayin Beis. That's what I really came to understand. That when you read Ayin Beis, it has exactly the same feeling, except it's a language that you could Kavyochel think he's speaking in a more, I guess, I don't like the word seichel actually, because there's plenty of aveda here, but it's the same thing. It's just that Toras Sholom is like, it's like when the musician is playing the music, you hear the formal presentation. Then afterwards, he starts playing, the in between the lines, and you say, that's what you meant. So I really see it as one. And the Toras Sholom, for me, opened up my eyes to be able to appreciate Ayin Beis, Chassidus in general, through the eyes of Toras Sholom, that made it really come alive in that very, you call it hergish dika way, very personal, very You know, that I mean, I guess it's a language that's not the formal structure of it. It's like when it's the same when you learn Gemara. You learn with a master. It's not just the Gemara that you learn. You know, you learn a whole lachluchius. There's a whole in between the lines, a whole we call it moisture, not just the dry information, but you feel the moisture in it. So I agree with you, but I just wanted to take it a step further.
Maybe you said this already in your own way, which is probably the better way, but how you can see Lamata Lamaila as being encompassed within Lamaila Lamata and within Atzmus is that from Atzmus perspective, everything it's Atzmus. So therefore, even our perspective on Atzmus from Lamata Lamaila is, and you said Mitzara Giluim, which is perhaps the same thing what I'm saying, but it must be encompassed within Atzmus because everything's encompassed within Atzmus. It's just a different angle, different perspective on, and it's from the Yeshaniva, from our perspective, which is very limited. But nevertheless, as we think through it, as we climb the ladder, as you say, as we grow, as we mature, it begins to make more sense if we'll make sense, kiviyachol. But because everything's Atzmus, it has to be, by definition, it has to be encompassed. And I think Mitzad Giluim is probably the easiest way to understand it, because everything we know is Bagilui. We can't know, by definition, we can't know what's in Hester. We can understand Hester's Hester, but we can't understand the nature of it unless we come from top down. But we can still identify it. Is that a fair perspective on the matter?
I'm not really understanding what you're saying, but I'm not sure what are you saying? That everything is Atzmus? Yeah, of course, everything, because that's the whole point. But
I'm saying even our perspective from Lamata Lamaila is Atzmus. If we're understanding it correctly.
I'm not sure what that means. I mean, right now we're talking to each other. This is from Atzmus' perspective or from our perspective?
Well, I would say from our perspective. It's kind of like, I don't know. Let's say you look from the sky down at a house. You're in the airplane and you see a lot more than one house. You see a whole city. You see maybe a whole, whole region of the country when you look down. But if you're in one house looking up, all you see is the sky. You may not even see the airplane that's looking at you. But
that's obvious. You don't need Toras Sholom or Ayin Beis for that. That's of course that's the way it is. We're talking about the fact that we are subjective human beings who relate to ourselves, and we are self-contained entities. And we were then given a mitzvah and also information. God revealed things to us to be able to see. It's not just going up on top of a mountain. The example is good on a very basic level, but we're talking here not about just a different vantage point. You're talking about Atzmus' vantage point is very different reality than ours. So to me, it's what you said. I don't need to learn Ayin Beis and Toras Sholom. Everyone understands that a child looks at the world through their little myopic peephole, and an adult can look from the mountain point of view, from a bird's eye view. It's a lot more what we're learning here than just that.
I hear you. Yeah, because it's a different perspective. If you're kol ba'atzmuso, but you can't see things as if you're an independent being. That's your point.
That's one point. There's more points to that as well, which is that Atzmus is qualitatively a completely different reality than our own.
Right.
So yes, there are levels. For example, you could be in Atzilus, and where you look at existence is different than the way existence looks at Atzilus. That's where what you're saying fits more. But when you're talking about Atzmus, it's not just higher than Atzilus. Atzmus is a whole different reality, which is why it takes a lot more work. In other words, I gave the example of looking at matter through the eyes of matter or through the eyes of subatomic particles. So there, it's not just a quantitative shift, it's a qualitative shift. It's still not Atzmus. I totally agree. But the point is you want to be able to qualitatively look at things. It's just like the difference between how an expert trained person looks at, let's say, a map, and how a novice looks at it. A novice look at a map, he won't see the patterns. An expert will connect the dots and just see the forest from the trees. So that's a qualitative shift. And then you keep going higher and higher. But what you're saying, what we're talking here is a very general, very general. I'm speaking far more specific right now, what the Toras Sholom adds and so on. But okay, any other questions? Because I would like, let's see what time we have. As I said, I would like to now, again, summing up everything we learned here. So if there are any questions on this very discussion about Yichud, Matla, but as I said, Ayin Beis is Matla. That's why there I would bring much more the idea what he's speaking in Ayin Beis to Toras Sholom, not so much what we learned here at the end, but the general theme, which I'll get to. But right now, what I wanted to do was go back and say, okay, so when the Rebbe Rashab finishes the Hemshech, so what's left? What did he not conclude? And we know exactly what he didn't conclude because he's began the topic. That's where I want to go next. But I don't want to go there until we, stop. We cover this leg of the marathon, make sure everybody is comfortable to move there. Any other comments, questions on what we learned till now? Okay. I'll just say one more line that maybe helps sum it up. Remember, Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyasleis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim, which immediately tells you that he desired a Dira B'Tachtenim, a Dira to Atzmus. Atzmus in Tachtenim tells you, I don't need you to be me. That's not Dira B'Tachtenim. That Atzmus is everything, is before even Nesava. That's Atzmus. Atzmus is everything, period. I want you in Tachtenim, where there's Giluyim and there's levels, and you're an independent consciousness, and you don't feel you're one with Atzmus, and you don't even feel that you're one with godliness for that matter, with Atzilus. And Bri, Yitzira, I want you to work your way from Tachtenim, to work your way back, to connect with me, that I should be dwelling among you like a Nadira, that you are my home. Not just I'm coming to visit. And it's not just temporary, a permanent home on this earth, that Atzmus, as Atzmus is without any filters, should be completely comfortable in Tachtein. So if you want a paradox, that's the ultimate paradox of all, what God desires. Because you're not saying, build for me a Mishkan, and part of me will dwell in you, and the rest of me will be beyond. No, Diril Atzmuse is the expression. So how do you do that? How do you even begin? As I've always pointed out, the antithesis and the absolute antithesis, diametric opposite in every possible way between Atzmus and Tachtenim. And here we're saying a Dira Atzmus in Tachtenim. And again, Dira. A Dira means a place where, not a place of work, not a place of leisure, a permanent home where you're completely comfortable without any garments, as Chassidus brings. So for that, you need a very elaborate and complex process, because you need to, first of all, cover that it has to be in Tachtein, which means it has to be on our terms. We have to be able to relate it, or else it's not Tachtein. Again, Atzmus has that without us. Second, it has to be on Atzmus terms. Atzmus is completely there. So how do you begin to even? That's why Mamat Lamayla Maylamata plays such a tremendous role, because it means that you're covering every aspect. It's like you want the student, the beginner student, to become one with a master teacher. So you have to do things that the student can relate to. At the same time, you want to make sure the teacher's brilliance and teacher's essential state is also not compromised. So this is where Mamat Lamayla comes in, Mamayla Mata comes in. Then they meet and they overlap and they speak to each other. And you have Mamala and Sevav and Atzmus, and there's times you do it from the bottom up and times from the top down. As we shall see soon, that's where Tefillah plays a tremendous role from the bottom up. Torah plays a critical role from the top down. Mitzvahs is in between the two, as we shall discuss. And of course, Tshuva plays a role as well. So we have a whole series of tools and methods that are all help to make sure this interface will be complete. And ultimately the joining and fusion of both in every possible way, without compromising either. So you see, this is not a small process. And look, it's already thousands of years that great tzaddikim was talking about back from Adam and Chava, Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, all the generation, Matan, Torah, Moshe, and so on, all the way till our time. This is what they've been working on. So we're part of a historical process. And each did their part, their role. And together, cumulatively, it will all join together. We say La'asad love will be the total permanent fusion between both Atzmus Diralei Yisbarach and in Tachtein. So give it a little more broader context so you can understand why it's not a small process. It's not okay, do this and you do that and that's it. There's so much here going on. And that's why we indeed need every day we daven, we learn, we do mitzvahs, Torah, Tefillah, a Torah, Vedic, Milas, Chasodim, the three pillars upon which the world stands. Each one has something that the other does not completely have. They have plenty of overlap. But nevertheless, they each have their also particular functions. And then we're not even going into the details of the Torah you learn and the details of which mitzvahs we do and the details of what tefillas we say. Because there's all that as well, including Shabbos and Yom Tov and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur and Sukkot and weekdays, etc., etc., etc. So just wanted to give that, I guess, general overview.
It seems so daunting when you say it like that. I'm listening to you. How in the world? I mean, I know Hashem can do anything, but I mean, we're sitting
No,
here.
I'm not worried about Hashem. I'm worried about us.
Oh, no, I'm saying Hashem, if he wanted to, could do, I mean, but Rabbi, I mean, it's a little.
I don't know if, my reaction is exhilarating. I feel like, wow, I'm part of a journey that began with Adam and Eve in Gan Eden. Avram is on our team. Yitzchak is on our team. Yaakov is on our team. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Moshe, David, Melech, Shlomo, Rabbi Akiva. I mean, I'm going to all the Arizal, the Rashbi, all the Tanoim, Amoraim, and Goinim, and all the Rishonim, Achrenim, and then of course the Baal Shem Tov and all the Rabbeim. I can't be more excited.
Well, it's great. I'm excited too. It's just that, when you say
why is that daunting? It's like the best team you'll ever have. I mean,
of course, but I feel unworthy. I mean, we're midgets, really. We're midgets. I mean, I'm listening to you and I'm like,
don't let the haunting voices of your childhood disturb this.
All right.
You feel you're unworthy? No, God chose you, and you're here. You live in this world. And you're part of this plan. I mean, that's how I see it. What do you mean you're unworthy? Why are you unworthy?
I mean, I get. I mean, I don't know.
You have to do your job. No one's asking you to do Moshe Rabbeinu's job.
I know. I don't want to make it about me. It just, I mean, it just like I'm listening, and this is, wow. It's a lot.
Well, you know what? You are a chelik elokam emal mamish. God created you, your child. He gave you a piece of godliness, and you're unstoppable if you want to be. This is why Am Yisrael Chai. This is why we're here as a Jewish people, undaunted, unflappable, and invincible and indestructible.
Okay, I will take that with me. I will keep that in mind.
No, you're entitled to your question. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I'm just trying to tell you that another perspective. It all comes down to, that confidence.
Yes, I hear you.
And remember, we're standing on the shoulders of the giants before us. And we're told that so much, 99% of the work has been done. And we have one more little drop to go across the finish line. So, if you lived in the time of Avram Avinu, imagine how daunting it would have been then.
That's true.
a pagan world. Nobody was interested. There was no such thing as civil liberties, social justice, human rights, love. The United States is only 250 years old. I'm not saying, but I mean, as an institutionalized country that abides, at least officially, by these principles.
That's
The Rebbe
helpful.
would often quote that when you go out to battle, there was a custom, even before the first battle, that you sing a march of victory, of Netzachim. You didn't even fight the first battle. Why? Because the confidence, you know that you will win. And you see, by the way, every baseball game, every football game, every sports team, what do? Look how they begin their games. They all come together, they huddle together, they start yelling and screaming and cheering and this and pep talks. Because there's a certain element of knowing that we're in it together, and together we can prevail and will prevail. That creates a tremendous morale and confidence. And the Alter Rebbe in chapter 26 in Tanya says, with example, when two people are wrestling and one is demoralized and depressed, even if he's stronger, he's going to lose. Because when you're demoralized, you don't have the willpower, the strength, the confidence to really make it. So you can have all the strength in the world, but you need that willpower. You need that impetus, that confidence, fortitude.
It's true. It's just what's been going on the last couple of weeks. I mean, I just feel we really need a lot of pep talks because
okay.
Yeah,
I wish you would have been at the Allgemeiner when I spoke about this. And I said, the Jewish people, I said, are like a tea bag. You don't know how strong they are until you put them into hot water. So
I understand. One of the reasons I wasn't there was because of my back, which I'm
I know. I understand. I know you wanted.
No, what I'm saying is I'm on the medication. Maybe that's what's making me a little depressed.
Okay, so just know that your brothers and sisters right here in this class and all over the world are there, and we're going to make it.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
You get better, and meanwhile, we fight the war. I don't just mean in Gaza. I don't just mean in Gaza. I mean also the spiritual war everywhere.
If I may add, you are listening to the right channel, the channel which teaches us how to take darkness and turn it into light.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forgive me for that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring everybody down. I just maybe just where I'm coming from right now. So I
can't speak for everyone else, but for me, you didn't bring me down. You made me even more motivated to bring you up.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I really appreciate it.
I know what the others feel. How do you guys feel?
You took my words away. I was going to say, thank you for bringing up this question that caused you to answer.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. Very strongly. Okay, so I think we'll stop here because next class is going to be, I'm going to go back to the themes of Ayin Beis and see what has not been covered and list it all so know what we need to cover in the next classes. How does that sound? Good?
Great. Looking forward to it.
Hope you're feeling better, Robin.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you for sending your friends. They did tell me they liked it, so that we already communicated. So that's
wonderful. I'm so happy. I'm so pleased that they went.
It was beyond my expectations. Even the success, it was great crowd, great energy. It was very united, very emotional, very good.
That's fantastic. Baruch Hashem.
We'll post videos, clips or videos of it. It was all recorded. Am Yisrael Chai, and now go to the fourth week.
I should also tell you that they thanked me for having, getting them there. So that it was very
good.
It was good.
I'm glad. Okay, so we'll stop here. As I said, let's finish the Toras Sholom. I did the Chukas Tov Shemem Ches.